Gracious Lord, Father of heaven, we come before you at this time to thank you for this wonderful opportunity to meet together and to study your word and to be edified by it. And we pray for those who are sick or not among us, Lord, that you would restore them and bring them back to us soon. We pray that this hour might glorify you and your Son, and that you will help us to stay bonded together during these difficult times. We ask all these things through the high priest, Jesus Christ. Amen. Well, good morning. I assume all of the children have gone to their respective Sunday schools. And like I said in the chat, if you can put whatever notifications you'd like us to read about updates on different people, that would be great. So I appreciate your time and cooperation on this. So we're going to do just because so much happened this week. I wanted to continue to share with you some of the current events that are just astounding in my book. So there's so many of them. Um, so we're going to start with this one, which is a recap of the numbers of immigration of Jews back to Israel in 2021, and it says this last year saw a 30% global surge in aliyahs, which is basically going up to Jerusalem. That's the term, and it's used for immigration waves in Israel. Record-breaking immigration from the U.S. New figures show that the highest aliyahs from France in 4 years. We know why that is, because there's been so much anti-Semitism in France. Increased arrivals also from South Africa. And aliyah immigration to Israel surged in 2021 with 27,000 new arrivals from across the globe, representing 30% increase over the previous year's 21,000 immigrants, according to the statistics released today at the Ministry of the Aliyah in Integration, the Jewish Agency for Israel and Nefesh. The past year also brought a record-breaking 4,000 Olim in the United States who arrived in Israel with the assistance of Nefesh. This immigration from the U.S. consists of 30% increases over 2020 and the highest annual number of Olim from the United States since 1973. Another 400 Olim arrived this year from Canada, bringing the expected total of Olim in North America in 2021 to over 4,400. So that's pretty amazing because we haven't seen that high in numbers in from the United States immigrating to Israel in quite a while. And if you look at how many are worldwide, I think that there's like 7 million in Israel, and then about 12 in the United States, and about 6 everywhere else in the world. So it's happening quite quickly. And then this last part says the ALIA numbers also show a 40% jump in immigration from France this year compared to 2020, and the arrival of 3,500, the highest amount of from that country in the past 4 years. So the numbers are there. It's pretty incredible to see how many of them have returned. Roger, can you read this slide for me?
Hey, Joe, we
Yeah.
can't see your screen. If you can share it, please.
Oh my gosh, I didn't know that. I'm so sorry.
Okay.
Well, please let me know if there's anything technically wrong. So this was the first slide. I won't read it again. And then this is the second slide. Go ahead, Roger. Can you see it okay? Roger, I can't hear you.
You want me to read the whole thing?
Is that okay? So the one on the left-hand side would be fine.
Okay. Other significant sources of aliyah this year include 900 Olim from Argentina, an increase of 55% over last year, and the highest number of immigrants from the country since 2003. 650 Olim from the United Kingdom, an increase of 22% over 2021. 550 Olim from Brazil, 550 Olim from South Africa, a dramatic increase of 72%, particularly in comparison with figures from the last decade, and 290 olim from Mexico, a 55% increase. The growing popularity of
Oh yeah.
Aliyah among the younger generation continued as well, as 55% or 14,620 olim of all this year's olim were under the age of 35. Further, 16% of olim were ages 36 to 50, 13.6% were 51 to 64, and 14.7 were 65 and older. The city welcoming the most olim in 2021 was Tel Aviv, where 2,870 immigrants chose to make their way home, followed by Jerusalem with 2,760 arrivals. Netanya with 2,710 and Haifa with 2,000. Other cities where new olim arrived in 2021. They also included Ashdod 940, Bat Yam 920, Ramana 880, Bet Shemesh 860, Raya 825, and Beersheba 750. This year also brought olim with diverse professional backgrounds, including over 1,100 doctors and paramedical professionals who will join the Israeli health system, 1,670 olim from the fields of technology and engineering, 960 from the fields of accounting and law, and 750 educators. Joe, I might have come in late. What is the olim? I don't understand that word.
As far as I understand it, they're waves of immigration. If I understand it, so
Okay.
from different countries. So the point is that they're coming in from all over the world, as they have been. And the immigration was obviously, there were 4 oliums before World War II. There was a high amount during World War II, also a very big increase right after World War II. And there was constant immigration. 1989 was the signature year because of the collapse of communism, where they were coming from Russia in droves. And now the numbers are picking up coming out of the United States, which we've never seen, or Canada, which is pretty amazing. And I think it's because there is a slight uptick in anti-Semitism in the United States. So this is the major point, is that it's increasing. So we'll go on to the next one. So this situation is getting so serious, I think we could even see next week that Ukraine is engaged in battles, skirmishes. Nobody's going to call it war. Not Russia and not Ukraine, but everybody is prepared and on the border. And the reason I think we have a good indication from Russia is basically they did, on Friday, they did all these cyber attacks against Ukraine and turned off everything. Their internet, their power, it was just a complete shutdown of their government. So what you should know is Ukraine used to be part of of Russia. It became independent. It's been trying and trying and trying to become part of NATO for protection from the European powers and from the United States. And everybody's kind of played around with it. Nobody has done anything officially with it, except for basically back in 2008 when George Bush was still president. He tried to get them to come in. Angela Merkel from Germany opposed it. Now they're still trying to do it, still trying to drum up international support, but it's not going very well. And what Russia's done is they're just kind of chipping away at the country's edges. They took away Crimea, and they're basically following the same pattern, and we're going to see it in just a minute. Can I get one of the Pinkstons to read this slide? I don't know who's at the computer, whether it's Betty or Eb or Debbie or David, so any one of you.
Hey, Joe, you want me to read this slide?
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks.
Okay. U.S. and Russia agree to talk as Putin hits out on Ukraine, BBC 12/24/21. U.S. officials have said talks could take place in January on Russia's troop buildup near Ukraine after President Vladimir Putin announced he was hopeful of a meeting in Geneva. The Russian leader has demanded immediate guarantees on the future of NATO to defuse the crisis. The ball is in their court. They have to give us some response, Mr. Putin said at his annual press conference. He threatened military measures, but denies planning to invade Ukraine. Ukraine security officials say more than 100,000 Russian troops have been sent close to its borders, and the U.S. has threatened Mr. Putin with sanctions like none he's ever seen if Ukraine comes under attack. Senior White House officials declined to respond to the Russian president's core demands that NATO abandon all military activity. And that's as far as I can see.
Okay. In Eastern Europe and not admit Ukraine as a member, although both appear to be non-starters. So to understand the situation, Ukraine has definitely wanted the protection and the political acumen of being part of the European community, and wanted to be part of NATO and several other organizations to be part of the EU as well. And the United States is trying to put more pressure to make that happen. And Putin is basically like, you will never have Ukraine and they will never be part of you. I will stop them because I'm going to invade them and make them part of Russia again. But he's not saying any of that. He's playing it very, very coolly, even though he's got has amassed all of his military equipment and people along the border, and he's constantly acting like it's the other guy's fault and not his. So, do I have a reader for the slide real quick? Because it was sorry. We're just continuing on with that article for just a minute. But the thing to understand is that Russia is threatening, okay, we'll back off if you don't allow them into NATO. But it goes a lot further than that.
I'll read it, Joe.
Okay, go ahead. Thank you.
You're welcome. Ukraine's showdown at high noon. U.S. and Russia agree to talk as Putin hits out on Ukraine, BBC 12/24/21. It's you who must give us guarantees and give them immediately, now, Mr. Putin said on Thursday, stressing that military measures were not his preferred choice. White House Press Secretary Jen, how do you say that?
Psaki.
Said, although there had been no final agreement on diplomatic talks, the US was working towards them and looking forward to them. UK Foreign Secretary Liz, I'm sorry, I don't have my glasses on. Liz Truss.
Yep.
Okay, and my glasses aren't even really that great. Said she welcomed the fact that Moscow had signaled it is willing to enter talks in January, but warned any Russian attack would be met with sanctions that would hit Russia's economy. Despite heightened tensions around Ukraine's border, there was a glimmer of hope for the east of the country when Russian-backed separatists have fought a war with Ukraine's military for the past 7 years. A shaky 2020 ceasefire deal has been renewed by Ukraine, Russia, and the rebels, and hailed as a step towards de-escalation by the presidential chief of staff in Kiev. France and Germany called for the truce to be respected and for detainers to be exchanged.
Okay, so thank you so much for reading that. So it's the same old story. What they do is Russia sends in these Russian-backed separatists, which are basically terrorists, and they go into an organization, and what they do is they attack their own. They attack Russian presence within the country. Then Russia comes back with this narrative. This country is attacking our ethnic people, and we have every right to come in and defend them. And that's what they do. So it worked in Crimea in 2014, and they took Crimea away from Ukraine. And here's the reason why this is in Sunday school. It's going to hit all these countries you're seeing eventually. They'll just keep chipping away at Estonia, Lithuania, Poland, Romania, and it just won't stop. It's a domino effect. Meanwhile, Russia's big partner is who? China, out in Asia, and a neighbor of theirs, and they are having their own battle with the United States over the South China Sea. And so it's the US, Australia, New Zealand, Vietnam, India, Taiwan, the Philippines, all those nations are working with the United States to try to stop China from controlling all of this. Where it gets overwhelming is if both Russia and China start making big moves at the same time. If they do that, then it will overwhelm the alliances that are in the South Pacific and in the Atlantic, because Russia will take care of one end and China will take care of the other. So, meanwhile, everybody goes on with their lives and doesn't think anything really serious is happening, but it's building up. And what is another thing that Russia and China, and I believe Brazil as well, really want to have happen on the international scene? Anybody know?
Is it the current? Oh. Is it the currency, Joe?
Yeah, that's it. So they want to get the dollar off the international standard. If they do that, if they're successful in convincing other countries to do that, then we will be hit with probably one of the worst economic downturns in our history, even worse than the 29 crash, because right now we depend so much on the international currency being the dollar. So there's an economic war going on, there's a cyber war going on, but all of this also is not leaving out Israel. And we're coming back to that because Russia finally has this warm water port in Syria, and it's right above um, Israel. And of course, the Israeli army is firing and using its weapons and planes from the Golan Heights, which they captured in 1967, to take out all the military equipment that Iran has sent to Syria. And Israel has had to practice a lot of restraint and just target Iranian stuff because there's also a lot of Soviet equipment all over Syria. So they have to hit one without hitting the other. Anyway, it's a very sensitive powder keg and it's about to go off everywhere. So go ahead.
No,
Somebody else?
sorry.
I don't know if anybody had a comment. So Paul Martin, can you read this slide about these agreements? Oh, what I'm showing you on the left, you can see Ukraine right above the Black Sea where Crimea is and where all these buildups are. So they've got pictures, satellite pictures down below, and it corresponds to these orange cities where these buildups are in place from Russia to not with love attacking Ukraine. And on the right, you've got some stats about Ukraine, how many square miles, the population's 46.3 million, life expectancy, ethnicity, it's 76% Orthodox. The GDP per capita is 6,900. Unemployment's pretty high at almost 7%. And so the other piece to know that's not listed on here is the pipeline. It's called Nord Stream 2, and it goes right through Ukraine into Germany. So that's why Germany is like, we should just calm down. We shouldn't be involved in this. They're not as strong of an advocate against Russia's invasion because they know they have to depend on Russia's oil to exist. The pipeline has basically got most of the European nations completely dependent on their oil. And as you also know, what is Russia doing in the North Pole? They're drilling everywhere. They absolutely love the fact that global warming has given them a great opportunity. The ice is melting. So now they can go in and do all this oil exploration in the Arctic, which is international. It doesn't belong to Russia. So they're getting all this oil in an international area and nobody's going to stop them. So Paul, are you able to read this one? Paul Martin? Okay, I'll read it. Demands for NATO president. Oh, I've got it on here. Let me see. Can you all hear the audio or no? Yes? Can you all hear the audio at all?
Yes, it's loud and clear.
Okay, I'll just finish reading it since I interrupted. It'll start all over again. We didn't come to the US or the UK borders. No, they came to ours. He said during a mammoth 4-hour session, according to NATO, accusing NATO of cheating Russia with 5 waves of expansion since 1990. Ms. Psaki pointed out that the only aggression on Russia's border with Ukraine was from the Russian forces and Mr. Putin's bellicose rhetoric. So he's constantly threatening this country, and I think next week and the week after, this is the perfect time for Russia to attack, isn't it? Why would now be the best time for them to attack? I want you to think of 2 events in history. One would be Napoleon coming in to Russia, and the other one would be the Germans during World War II. What happened to them both?
They froze to death.
Pretty much, yeah. They froze to death. Napoleon's army was completely destroyed. Like, it didn't exist. He marched in with over 100,000 troops and marched out with 10,000. So it's pretty significant. And Hitler made the same mistake. He went into their country. So this is one of those perfect opportunities for Russia to get in while nobody's willing to go in a war with Russia in January in Ukraine. So this is showing you sort of the military intervention that's been going on in Ukraine. So it's been kind of like a proxy war where they're sending in other operatives to do the bidding of Russia, but it's been going on for 7 years, and now we're reaching the zenith or the fever pitch of what's about to happen. This is a quote from him. I can tell you outright and unequivocally that there are no Russian troops in Ukraine. Nope, they're right on the border, and we've got operatives all over the country. So again, what he really wants is to get this country back. And then as soon as Ukraine is over and becomes part of Russia again, that's not where this stops. All those Eastern Bloc countries in Europe, he wants to get those back. Uzbekistan has been, Kazakhstan has had all kinds of problems recently as well. So these are the invasion fears. And like I said, they're chipping away at the edges. And you can see the amount down here, and I'll play this for you. Hopefully you can hear it.
We can't hear anything, Joe. You may have to go to the share screen option and then share audio.
Okay,
I'll read it if you want.
go ahead. Thank you.
The Russian aggression in Ukraine started with the treacherous invasion of Crimea, when in the days of political uncertainty following the popular Euromaidan protest and the escape of Ukraine's President Viktor Yanukovych, in a swift maneuver, Russian soldiers stormed and seized all government buildings and strategic facilities. They had no insignia, wore balaclavas, and remained silent when approached with questions. Less than a month after the landing of the Little Green Men, Russia staged a fake referendum and annexed the Crimean Peninsula. The covert operation in Crimea was Russia's first test of its new approach to warfare in Ukraine. It was clearly successful, and within several weeks of the annexation, Russian military personnel with their weapons, gear, and equipment started flowing across the border from mainland Russia into eastern Ukraine. At first, those were small teams carrying only small arms, but gradually their numbers grew and their weapons became more varied and deadly, from machine guns to grenade launchers to howitzers and tanks. This creeping military buildup, without official declaration of war, was a part of Russia's hybrid strategy, seeking to gain control over the territory of Ukraine, while doing its best to convince other nations that this was a strictly internal conflict.
Thank you. So this, you read it very well. This is a big playbook page for all of us to understand of how we can expect Russia to expand its territory over the next several years. So it's very clear they're constantly going to deny that there's any action going on to the press and everything else. And they don't have to win over everybody's approval or their blessing or even believing them. They just have to do what any good lawyer does in a courtroom: create reasonable doubt. If they create reasonable doubt, they can pit the other countries against each other and stop them from doing anything because it's not really clear what they're doing. So it's very subtle and it's very brilliant because tactically he's sending in these separatists to basically destabilize the country completely. So there's no identifying patches on them. The press isn't going to come in there and get a snapshot of Russian troops in the middle of Ukraine because they're not wearing anything that's identifiable. There's no insignia, there's no patches, there's no nothing. They're just coming in and taking over the country, and it worked perfectly in Crimea. So they're going to use the same playbook in Ukraine. And of course, the international community is totally against it, but they're not willing to put any real backing into it because most people are still thinking about having had pulled out of Afghanistan, and they don't want to get involved in another war. Meanwhile, Israel's doing all it can to try to stay alive, and we'll talk about what's going on with Israel and Iran in just a minute. So thank you for reading that one. Oh, sorry. This is the next one. So this shows us these areas that are basically under attack to the on the east side of Ukraine, and how the Russians are being able to choke off. If you look at that little port where it says Mariupol, that's basically the main port for Ukraine, and Russia is doing everything they can to stop them from being able to get any support, even out to the Black Sea. Can I just have somebody read the first two paragraphs or first two bullets on this one?
I can do that.
Thank you, Adam.
At the time when Moscow kept sending trained servicemen and mercenaries with fake IDs and Russian-made weapons to Ukraine, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov employed the tactics of denial and was ridiculing the idea of Russia's involvement in Ukraine in his speeches. Russia, who was also fueling conflict by funding local groups led by people who could hardly conceal their shady business and criminal connections. Racketeers, smugglers, gangsters, and mob muscles, together with corrupt local officials, all generously funded by Moscow, made the backbone of the pro-Russian movement.
So it's amazing, you're basically hiring thugs to go in and do the bidding for Russia, so they're not there officially. And that way, when he's talking to the press, he says, we've got no troops in Ukraine. It doesn't matter. So you can see this blue and white hashed area is the separatist controlled territory. And they're just going to expand from there. But, it's very sad what's going to happen to Ukraine. And nobody's really going to stand in the way and try to stop them. But this pattern of what's happening here, you're going to see in Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, everything to the south and everything to the west of Russia. They're going to use the same tactic with all the same countries who basically got out of the Iron Curtain in 1989 after World War II. And then they're going to be basically, if I can use the term, puppet governments again. So this one is showing some more troop builds up and what's going on in the country. And I'll just say that there's been false hopes that there could be talks in either Austria or Finland between the United States and Russia. And of course, Russia's like, we're perfectly supportive of that. And they're pushing the date off to the summer and saying, we'll meet you with you this summer to discuss it. By this summer, the whole thing will be over, and Ukraine will be part of it. So anyway, this is more pictures of the Russian buildup. And again, the main point to realize here is that Russia also has indicated they would close off the Sea of Azov, throttling the only access to the vital Ukrainian port of Mariupol in the Black Sea. In eastern Ukraine, pro-Russian separatists have controlled two people's republics for years with the support of the Kremlin. And then France and then Germany are like, we'll broker the peace between Russia and Ukraine and try to help out. Well, Germany is basically on the side of Russia because the pipeline of oil is coming from them. So they're subtly acting on Russia's behalf. And it's not going to be a good situation at all. So this one is talking about President Biden getting involved and trying to mediate the situation, and it's not going to really work out that well. So tell me if you can hear the audio, okay? Can you all hear that?
No.
Okay. Can I get a reader then?
I'll read, Joe.
Okay, thanks.
Where, the whole thing?
Starting with facing what appears to be an accurate threat. Yep.
Where is that at? Facing? I'm sorry.
Okay. It's right
I've
at the, I don't know how much of the top you can see.
We're at perhaps food needs an opposite number.
That's fine. Go ahead.
All right, perhaps Putin needs an opposite number like the US facing what appeared to be an acute threat. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky began looking for more international support while calling on Paris and Berlin to establish another summit in the Normandy format meeting. He also told the British newspaper, the Financial Times, that he was open to Washington assuming a greater role in negotiations. Increased U.S. involvement does not take away from the importance of the European country's role as a mediator. According to Michael Galler, a German member of the European Parliament and Foreign Affairs spokesperson for the European People's Party, he told DW he does not see any conflict of interest in a greater U.S. role, and that he was very much in favor of the involvement of the United States. During the Normandy talks, Germany and France had always been pulling together in a direction agreed in close consultation with the United States, Galler said, but added there could be a physiological factor involved in a larger U.S. role in mediating the conflict. Perhaps Putin's self-image requires him to have an opposite number like the United States before he can bring himself to arrive at a solution.
Great, thank you so much. So they're hoping that the United States presence in all of this is basically going to try to turn the tide for Putin to make the right decision. But I seriously doubt that's going to happen in the coming months. They'll try to put sanction pressures on it and diplomatic pressures, but it's not likely to happen. So I'm going to summarize this slide because I don't want to run out of time. Basically, Andrea Merkel was the power broker before that tried to stop Ukraine from becoming a part of NATO, but she's basically out of office, and it's the new PM who's going to basically have to re-engage here between Russia and Ukraine. But of course, as we know, Germany is heavily involved in this pipeline that goes through Ukraine into their country. So I'll read the last paragraph. Significantly, Annalena Baerbock, the Greens candidate to succeed Merkel, called for more Normandy format negotiations. Baerbock called NORAD Stream 2, which is that pipeline that runs from Russia through Ukraine into Europe, a geostrategic error in the interview with DW and the Munich Security Conference in February, adding that this pipeline was hugely instrumentalized as a possible means of destabilizing Russia. So the big deal here is basically that pipeline that goes through Ukraine. I'm sure Russia has to pay some fees to keep it through there, but now it's a burden to them, and they would like to get Ukraine back. That way they don't have to pay for the pipeline, I'm guessing. Um, and is Germany the impartial broker? There is, however, one major bone of contention between Berlin and Washington. The German government refuses to give up on Nord Stream 2, the gas pipeline project that will transport gas from Russia directly to Germany. A number of European countries and the United States in particular oppose the pipeline, which is now almost complete because they fear it will make Berlin too dependent on Moscow and cut out other European transit countries where pipelines currently carry gas from Russia to Europe. So why this is important to Israel is it's going to more or less neutralize the power of Europe to do anything outside of what Russia says. What is Russia's policy towards Israel? It looks like another good seaport for Russia. I mean, they have no real positive dealings with them. So neutralizing the effect of what Europe can do and the United States is going to allow Russia to have even more influence in the Middle East. And that's one of the main reasons I'm showing you this. And this is more about the pipeline that's going through. When it comes to NATO, the military alliance turned down the Ukraine's application to join in 2008, and Kiev had the backing of the former US President George W. Bush, and it was Andrea Merkel who led the charge to oppose Ukraine's membership. Galler said the West faces a dilemma. Ukraine can only join NATO if it was in the benefit and safety of the existing NATO members. Putin is stopping precisely by that, by continuing the conflict. To a certain extent, he is taking us hostage. So I just want you to understand politically how savvy Putin is. He's confused and baffled all of Europe. They don't know what to do about Ukraine, and he's managed to stalemate the United States and any other country from helping um, Ukraine, and it's basically going to be the same situation for any country west of Russia and south of Russia, to include Israel. Um, and I'll read this quote over here. In the break of the official German party line, Galer said he believes that Berlin's backing of the project was a mistake from the outset. At the same time, he added that the German position towards Nord Stream 2 does not stand in the way of the credible negotiating role, because everyone knows internationally that we do not stand equidistant between Ukraine and Russia. Moscow. Moscow said Galer is the only government to have violated international law and has its troops and mercenaries on other countries' territories. Germany clearly sees Russia as the guilty party. So that's them saying we do have the autonomy to do this, but they really are so dependent on the gas pipeline. Sorry. So this is a good map showing you where things are within the last 2 weeks of the buildup, with all those red areas with rocket systems, tanks, artillery pieces, and more. So what I would compare this to as well was the Weimar Republic of the 1930s. There was great social pressure to have reparations. And in the same way that Germany was embarrassed and humiliated by the 1917 Versailles Treaty, Russia is embarrassed and shameful of what happened to them in 1989, that the whole Russian communist thing fell apart. So now they're on the resurgence, just like the Weimar Republic was in Germany in the 1930s, to expand, to get back what they lost. And that's what I think you're going to see a lot of this year. Here again is what we're seeing basically as a full C all the way around to the north, to the east, and to the south. They're attacking them from all these different directions. For the sake of time, I want to keep on going. Okay, so we're going to talk about this for a minute. The Pope announced some things that are coming up. This was actually on the Mountain Grove website, which I thought was interesting. And they basically quoted Revelations 19:19, and I saw the beasts, the kings of the earth, with their armies together, making war against him who was sitting on the horse and against his army. This is not a reference to the final conflict in which the European remnant nations and the original Roman Empire called the beast come together with a war against Christ. To what extent will the Holy See or the Pope have a role in forming and steering this alliance of nations? One clue is provided in Revelations 19, where it is revealed that the false prophet is captured with the beast. The activities of the Holy See with nations are therefore important to watch. So basically, what this is saying is, and you'll see it in just a second, the Pope is basically saying, hey, we're the international glue that's going to hold everything together. We got 183 nations who will work with us. So my thought is that they're basically saying the United Nations really isn't going to give you any solutions. Come to us and we'll fix the problem for you. And you'll see that on the next slide. So it says the Vatican website notes there is currently 183 states that have diplomatic relations with the Holy See. In addition, there are European Union and the Sovereign Military Order of Malta. So he's building up his case that basically we have the powers to do this. In his message to the ambassadors from the states who gathered from the international audience at the Vatican on January the 10th, the Pope addressed uh, that the toll of COVID pandemic on people, the economy, and the immigration and refugee absorption issues, especially for the EU, and then climate change and the need for multilateral global action conflicts and the threats to peace in Syria, Yemen, Ethiopia, Ukraine, and Myanmar, with the southern Caucasus and the Balkans, the abundance of weapons and the need for nuclear disarmament. So it's hard pressed to know a topic he didn't cover in that January 10th meeting with them. So he's inserting himself into all these different situations and acting like they are the change agents that are going to fix it all. So here's where it specifically hits Israel. In the past, no steps forward were made in the peace process between Israel and Palestine. I would truly like to see the two people rebuild mutual trust and resume speaking directly to each other. They never have done that well. In order to reach the point where they can live in two states side by side in peace and security without hatred and resentment, but the healing born of mutual forgiveness. The Holy See likewise considers it important that the resumption of negotiations in Vienna on the nuclear accord with Iran, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, achieve positive results in order to guarantee more secure and fraternal peace. Um, Once again, he's taking the tactic the United States has done in the past and other European nations is to create the two-state solution, which is never going to work because um, Israel has basically claimed these as territories that belong to them, and we know that um, basically Israel has had the Abrahamic Accords with about 5 different countries over the last year and a half. Pretty amazing stuff, and so I think the Pope is trying to get out in front of this and say, I'm the real peace broker, not Israel, not the United Nations, and come to me, and I'm the one who can broker the peace. Does anybody have any comments on that? Okay, I just wanted to share that with you. So,
Joe, can you hear me?
Yep.
I was wondering because the Catholic Church hasn't played as big a part as it has in the past. It's almost kind of been in the background. So this could be that bringing it to the forefront again in these last days.
mhm.
It has been quieter than usual history is recorded. So.
Yeah, so it's like it's very interesting, and I thank Martha for bringing this up to me, and also Margaret, because I wasn't aware of this one, but they're basically trying to broker peace. I don't know how successful they're going to be at doing this, but at least they're putting it out there. So it says the message for international peace and fraternity are undoubtedly crafted by the Secretary of State, Cardinal Pietro Parolin, and that's the guy here in the black with a red hat and red sash, um, and the Secretary for Relations with States, Archbishop Paul Gallagher. You can listen to the latter's 2019 interview with The Economist at the link below and explore the question, is the Pope head of the world's most powerful governments? The most significant thing, what the Pope did not mention, he did not express his desire for the return of Christ as a solution for the world's woes and need for healing. Um, in that omission, lie the seeds for the coming conflict. So there's no mention of Christ's return to this earth at all from their point of view. If you want world peace, you don't go to the Prince of Peace, you come to the Pope. So I think that's a pretty strong statement to be making at this time. So the other big one happened yesterday. This huge underwater volcano erupted off of Tonga and basically caused a tsunami across the Pacific. Now, it wasn't a deadly tsunami. It was a little dangerous for the countries that were around it. What's amazing to me is some of the satellite footage you're going to see in just a minute. So, Nicholas, how do I share with sound?
If you go up into the top, in the green, there should be an option that says, on the sharing option, it says share sound.
I clicked on the green.
You see where it says that?
I'm trying
Can you
to.
click on view options?
You can't hear you. Oh.
Okay, I'm just trying to, because I've got a video I want to show, so I'm trying to figure out. Share sound. Okay, tell me if that works, okay?
Okay.
So I'm gonna try to hit this. A tsunami has hit Tonga's largest island, Tonga Tapu, and reportedly sent waves flooding into the capital after underwater volcano in the South Pacific exploded in a violent eruption on Saturday, sending a cloud of ash and gas steam into the air. A tsunami warning has been issued for the islands of Tonga and parts of Japan. Tsunami advisories have also been issued for New Zealand's North Island as well as the west coast of the United States from California to Alaska, as well as Canada's British Columbia. The first tsunami wave had already been felt on the U.S. West Coast as early Saturday morning. David Schneider, the tsunami warning coordinator at the National Weather Service's National Tsunami Warning Area in Palmer, Alaska, told CNN. Great. Did y'all hear that okay? Everybody hear that okay? Okay, I'm gonna play. I'm sorry? You did hear it?
Yes, we did.
Okay, so I'm gonna play this video very quickly, and I know we're running out of time.
The Hunga Hai Pa volcano in the South Pacific Ocean, about 70 kilometers north of the Tongan capital, Nuku'alofa, has been active in recent days. Its eruption sending ash more than 20 kilometers into the sky on Friday. Another eruption on Saturday was so violent it was seen from space.
And this was really
and
amazing.
registered
Look
2,000
at that.
kilometers away in New Zealand. It triggered a tsunami which hit Tonga within 20 minutes. Waves crashing ashore on the main island Tonga Tapu, and violent ash turned skies over the capital as black as night. Residents of low-lying islands in the area have been told to stay indoors, wear a mask outside, and cover rainwater reservoirs due to the falling ash and acid rain. Here's how one woman described it to her family and friends.
There was like explosions in town. I guess it was from the volcano. And they like literally popped our eardrums and everyone just froze. Everyone froze in town. And then it just...
So I'm gonna move on to the next slide, hopefully.
like when pitch...
Don't know how to get out of this. Okay, there we go. I'm trying to, okay, there we go. So this is a picture from satellite space showing you the other islands in the South Pacific, and specifically this mushroom cloud of this undersea volcano that exploded near Tonga, which is just northeast of New Zealand and southeast of Japan. So it's pretty major. We're talking about in the last days that there'll be earthquakes in diverse places. And this is part of it. And this volcanic ash is part of the thing that is very scary because it can stop everything, including international travel by plane. Mount Redoubt did this to a KLM flight. It was coming into Anchorage. There was such a huge gas plume. It stuck to the silicon propellers and brought the plane down, but they were able to regain and land. But the one in Iceland that happened a couple years back basically stopped European air travel for a month. So volcanic ash can really take it all down very quickly. So they had a lot of surge in the area, tsunamis in the area, but they weren't severe, and it did come over to Alaska. My point in showing you this is that this is how quickly something like this can happen and affect everything internationally. The same thing could happen on another volcano in Iceland or, in the South Pacific. So for sake of time, well, this is where it was a threat yesterday. Basically, this entire coastline would be affected by a volcano in Tonga, which is